everyone! I know that many of you are applying to business school and are about to take Gmat. I've been there and I took my Gmat in 2014, and my decision to do an MBA was pretty spontaneous because I made a decision that yes, I'm going to study in the United States at the end of October, and I was taking my Gmat on December 25th. Now, I concentrated mostly on quantitative and verbal part, and only in the end of my preparation I realized that there is also essay and integrated reasoning section. But then I started to dig into this essay thing and I realized it doesn't really affect your score. So it doesn't matter how much you score on the essay, this 700 or 750 or whatever you score during your verbal and quantitative part would not be affected by the essay. Essay actually stands as a separate note on your Gmat score report. Then I started to read different blogs and forums whether universities actually care about how much you score during your writing section, and I realized that universities would mostly care about your quantitative verbal part, and there are, kind of business schools that maybe be interested in your writing score or your overall performance. Having that information in mind, I only spent 2 to 3 hours preparing for my writing section, and I really concentrated on my quantitative and verbal parts, and I scored 5 on my writing section. And at the time when I took Gmat, it gave me 60%, which is pretty decent because I'm not a native speaker, and I also had 700 on my Gmat overall, and that was enough for me to get into the university of my dreams and get full financial assistance to pursue my MBA. And now I want to share with you my strategy of handling the Gmat essay. Now, the first thing you need to know is that writing section is all the same. They would actually give you a paragraph or a statement and they would tell you to discuss it. But what this means, discussing, is actually disagreeing with the statement, and you would need to prove that it's insufficient, that the statements are made on wrong or insufficient assumptions. Your essay has to consist of 5 paragraphs. In the first paragraph you tell what's actually going on. Second, third and fourth paragraph you disagree with different parts of the statement, and in the 5th paragraph you summarize everything. Now, it's important to remember that 2nd, 3rd and 4th paragraph depict your ideas. Each paragraph stands for an idea, and it's really important to make sure that each paragraph is of the same volume, because otherwise they might think that some of your ideas are not really well developed. Now, I'm going to use a specific example. I'm going to read the task. I'm going to give you the exact templates that you can use for all of the Gmat essays. And these templates actually help me to do what I've done, prepare for that section in 2 hours and get a pretty decent score. Now here's the statement. The following appeared in the editorial section of a local newspaper. This past winter, 200 students from Waymarsh State College traveled to the state capitol building to protest against proposed cuts in funding for various state college programs. The other 12,000 Waymarsh students evidently weren't so concerned about their education. They either stayed on campus or left for winter break. Since the group who did not protest is far more numerous, it is more representative of the state's college students that are the protesters. Therefore, the state legislature need not heed the appeals of the protesting students. Discuss how well reasoned this is, blah blah blah. So this is very typical of Gmat. They give you some statement and you need to discuss it. Now, as I said, in the first paragraph, you need to state what you've actually read. And in the first paragraph, I say the argument claims, and this is what you need to learn. So you start with the phrase, the argument claims, that the state legislature need not heed the appeals of protesting students, since the group who did not protest is far more numerous, comma. Now you need to explain that you've actually got the data that is in the article. And this is the second phrase you need to remember. The conclusion of the argument is based on the premise. Remember that. That 12,000 Waymarsh students who did not protest weren't so concerned about their education. We're still in the first paragraph, and now I'm giving you the phrase how to finish it. The conclusion of the argument relies on assumptions for which there is no clear evidence. Hence, the argument is unconvincing and has several flaws. And I basically learned that sentence because when you have the structure in mind, you just need to insert several things from the essay or from the article, and this is how you write the essay. So I basically give you a half of the first paragraph and try to remember those phrases. Now we move on to the second paragraph where you have your first thought and you have to kind of be convincing. So I start with a phrase. First, the argument readily assumes that the students who have not taken part in the protest weren't concerned about their education. However, don't forget all those linking words, they're super important. It fails to mention other factors which could affect students' decision concerning their participation in protest. For example, I'm still in the first paragraph. 200 students that have traveled to the state capitol building could have been appointed as other students' representatives. Now these are my thoughts, so I'm trying to argue with the article because I'm not sure that they're making the right conclusions, and I'm using, my ideas for that. So for example, I thought that maybe those other 12,000 students appointed those 200 students to travel and protest on their side. And then another phrase you have to remember, the author fails to mention. Now, with all of those phrases, you're going to show that you disagree with the article. It doesn't rely on enough data. The author fails to mention the laws that regulate protests. The legal number of people taking part in the protest might have been limited in compliance with these laws. Also, another argument that I thought of. Now we go to the second paragraph, and here's my second thought. Second, and again the phrase you need to remember, the argument could have been much clearer if. So I start with this phrase, and this is what you have to do. Start your second paragraph with the exact same phrase, and it will really help you structure your ideas. Second, the argument could have been much clearer if it provided information on any other similar protests aroused by proposed cuts in funding for various state college programs. Now, you can always appeal to the thing that the article only describes one case. Always try to mention that it doesn't describe other processes and how they, which results they brought in. So always use that kind of comparative method. Then another phrase you need to remember. In fact, it is not at all clear. In fact, this is not at all clear. If similar actions were also taken by students of other colleges affected by proposed cuts. And now we go to the third paragraph. Finally, the argument fails to mention one of the key factors on the basis of which it could be evaluated, and this is actually the whole phrase that you need to learn. I'll repeat it once again, and you see it on the screen, so please feel free to stop the video and write everything down so you have a paper, and actually have a paper that you can carry with you and repeat things before you actually take the test. So finally, the argument fails to mention one of the key factors on the basis of which it could be evaluated, namely, if any of 12,000 students who haven't taken part in the protest are enrolled in the programs which would be affected should the cuts take place. And this was my third paragraph. I think it's a little shorter than the second one, so really what I do, I would also add something else to the third paragraph. And the last paragraph. Without this information, the argument remains unsubstantiated and open to debate. And you can always finish with the exact same phrase using the exact same words. Now I'm going to write the whole thing down, and please feel free to take the phrases, write them down, and have something like this for yourself as well. Guys, I really hope that this video was helpful, and let me know if you have any other questions concerning Gmat. I will be happy to film more if you're interested in that topic, and I wish you all the best in getting to your dream graduate business schools. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to stay tuned with other Gmat videos. And I'll see you soon. Thank you for watching this. Bye bye.